March. What a month full of intrigue and drama and murder. Okay, not really. It was kind of a boring month besides Scream 6 and John Wick 4. I mean, it was a great month for my channel. So much Scream content. Like, that was truly an era for me, and we welcomed many new cult members because of it. Unfortunately, we are now getting away from the Scream content, but that is until Scream 7 is announced. But today it's time to talk about everything else that I watched in the month of March. Also, happy 420 month. I know that a lot of us are excited about that. More fried content coming your way this April 2023. But for today, we'll start with all the TV shows that I watched. Guess who finally started Yellowjackets? Then we'll talk about all the non-horror movies that I watched, and so this will include Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania and John Wick Chapter 4. We also had a lot of horror rewatches in the month because I decided to revisit a lot of my favorite witch movies. I also did a live stream with Mika and Kira talking about our top 10 witch movies, so check that out if you haven't. Next up, what was I finally catching up on? New watches of old horror movies, and wouldn't you know it, I finally watched Book of Shadows: Blair Witch 2. Lots of thoughts on that one. And finally, we'll talk about new horror releases such as 65 and The Harbinger. But before we get into it, I'm a little bit nervous to ask, but I was wondering, have you subscribed yet? My subs can vouch this is the easiest cult/coven to join. All you have to do is subscribe. But the ones that get in good with the big guy also leave a like, they leave a comment, and they turn on the notification bell so they never miss the next meeting. I'm not telling you what to do though, like I don't even want you to subscribe, like it's whatever. Is the reverse psychology working? Did you subscribe? Never mind, I'm breezy, you know, it's whatever you want, so let's just get into it. I want to start with the fact that I finally finished Arrested Development. The Netflix produced seasons, so seasons 4 and 5, are such a chore to get through. That was miserable. So I'll leave it at that. But speaking of chores, you as well. What happened to this show? I was hoping the second half of the season would be better, that they were saving the good stuff. No. But I'm a completionist. I need to know how things end, and I did used to adore the show. I felt like they kept finding their voice in each subsequent season, like it kept getting better and better. But now without love, oh my god, those goddamn episodes are an hour long and they're full of nothing. What the hell happened? Why didn't they just end it after season 3, and why did they just greenlit it for season 5? A show that I could watch 20,000 seasons of, though, is Yellowjackets. Yeah. This follows a soccer team as they crash and get stranded in a forest. The plot is non-linear and bounces back and forth from them as children in the woods to the fallout they're experiencing as adults from this traumatic situation. This show is so good. You were right, I was sleeping on it, but it was kind of perfect timing because now season 2 is coming out, and yes, I am watching it. The central focus, I would say, is on the drama, and ooh mama, there is some drama in this show. Every single character is basically defined by their drama, and I'm not even mad about that. In fact, I eat it up. I'm like, yum. Regardless, all the characters feel so distinct, and you get a feel for them so quickly because of where all of their relationships start and how those relationships develop. My rings! I'm like Gollum. If I'm not wearing my rings, I die. I mean, I don't know. I just made that up. I've never seen Lord of the Rings. Oh my god, Kylie, how have you never seen Lord of the... I don't know. I'm getting to it, okay? There's a lot of classic cinema I'm still catching up on. Anyway, so the core of Yellowjackets, I would say, is the relationships between the girls, and it's so good. Karen Kusama is an executive producer, and you might know her from a little movie called The Invitation, or for a little movie called Jennifer's Body. I love what she has done for us in this industry. This show hits really close to home. It's sapphic, it taps into feminine rage and feminine power in such an exquisite and terrifying way. It very much has a Lord of the Flies kind of a vibe as they learn to adapt and survive in the wilderness. Also, I knew that Jasmine Savoy Brown was in it. She is the moment right now, good for her. But nobody told me that Juliette Lewis and Christina Ricci were also starring in it. And listen, this show is gory, it's unhinged, unbelievable even. But the least believable thing they try to convince me of is that Christina Ricci is not a beautiful woman. She goes on a date with some guy in one episode and he's so reluctant and doesn't want to be there, and I'm like, you mean to tell me that he wouldn't? She does a wonderful job in this quirky role though, and honestly good for her too. Yellowjackets and Wednesday in the same year, bravo. More people should employ her. I want to see her in more movies. Maybe they should cast her in You season 5. Maybe that would kind of spice things up again. But anyways, Yellowjackets, love the show. Season 2 is coming out right now, and life is grand. Swarm is up next, which is listed as a thriller, but I would say the tone is kind of hard to describe. This show follows an obsessed stan who goes to increasingly violent lengths for her favorite R&B singer. This is created by Janine Nabbers and Donald Glover. Glover also directed the first episode. Malia Obama is also credited as a writer on this series, and they were inspired by the real real-life mega fans of Beyonce. It's a very compelling background for this show, and adding to that, it is the acting debut of Billie Eilish, which I never saw that announced anywhere. There's usually a lot of Twitter pages that are dedicated to announcing like when certain actors have been cast in things, but the show was released on the 17th last month, and then suddenly it was like, yeah, Billie Eilish is acting now. It also stars Chloe Bailey and Rory Culkin very briefly, but our beloved Charlie. I'll be honest though, it's not very thrilling. The main thing about this show that kept me watching was the acting. I think that Dominique Fishback should get the Emmy, although she's up against Jenna Ortega. That's a tough one. Well, I don't know who's gonna be nominated yet. What the fuck do I know? Anyway, the show is also horrifying in concept because it's inspired by a lot of true stories about things that happened to or because of Beyonce and her Bay Hive. Ooh, God help ya. Every episode is based on real life internet rumors or stories, and they just put their character, played by Dominique Fishback, at the center of all those stories. It's a very unique sort of structure for a show, I think, and I feel like if I knew that before I went into it, I would have appreciated it a bit more, because it does feel a little bit disjointed and disconnected. But it's also such a fast watch because most of the episodes are under 35 minutes long, and so I watched the whole thing in 7 days. I watched it in 2 days. I'm conditioned, I think, to say 7 days because of The Ring, but I watched it in 2 days. I also promise that I will start The Boys soon. My subs have been begging me to watch this for the longest time. It's next up on my list. But I really enjoyed getting back into series this month. I haven't been an avid TV watcher for the past couple years, but I'm getting back into it, more so than movies at the moment. Like, I also finished Poker Face with my dad. The entire season was just incredible. And then I also started rewatching Wednesday because my mom wanted to watch it, and so I agreed to watch it with her. So anyways, now it is time to dive into all of the non-horror movies that I watched in March. Starting with The Social Network. Finally gave this one a go. The Social Network basically just follows Mark Zuckerberg through his scandalous rise to wealth. It follows the various court cases he found himself in and the horrifying reality of who he is as a person. This is a fantastic film with some amazing performances and really reaffirmed my perspective on Mark Zuckerberg. He's a fucking sociopathic loser who skirted so many laws to get to where he is, and he's played perfectly by Jesse Eisenberg. I wasn't giving 2011 enough credit. I thought that it would be a lot more forgiving and of the perspective of Zuckerberg, especially at that time, because the perspective on billionaires has changed so much in just the past few years. We all kind of hate them now, as we rightfully should. Guillotine, guillotine, guillotine. This movie was ahead of the curve before Eat the Rich became such a popular thing. Andrew Garfield is the man in it too. I think it's crazy that he didn't get a Best Supporting Actor nomination for this role. Highly recommend. It's not only illuminating, but super entertaining as well. Next up is Avatar: The Deep Dive. Won't linger on this one. It's just a behind-the-scenes making of Avatar: The Way of Water. Not much to say here. It's terrible. The format of network TV documentaries is so awful. I'm just gonna flat out recommend that you don't waste your time on it. I'm sure that with the Blu-ray release, or when Avatar: The Way of Water comes to Disney Plus, there's gonna be a lot of great behind-the-scenes content. So don't even bother with it, alright? Just don't even bother. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania is another new release that I finally saw. I would read off the synopsis, but does it even matter? No. My dad and I did about a 16-minute long bonus video over on Patreon talking about this movie and the state of Marvel and kind of where we want to see the franchise go from here. It's not looking good, I'll tell you that much. Guardians of the Galaxy 3 comes out next month and it's making no noise. Like, what the hell is going on? Quantumania just felt so soulless. It's full of like this lowbrow children's humor. It looks like shit. None of the actors seem like they want to be there. Just go join the Patreon. I cannot talk about this movie anymore. Still holding out hope for Guardians 3. Call me crazy. But my dear children, it is time to talk now about John Wick. My dad and I binged all 4 movies in the span of 3 days, I think. I never realized how much I would love John Wick. Now I'm obsessed. They're basically just slashers, except with way better stunt work, and instead of our protagonist being stalked, our protagonist is the killer. Keanu Reeves does all of the action himself, and he says that he doesn't do any of his own stunts. I feel like there's a very fine line between action and stunts. He does like 90% of the work himself, and they are wild. The action sequences are unrelenting, and so many people die. So many people die. He's not the boogeyman. He's the man you sent to kill the fucking boogeyman. Baba Yaga. Baba Yaga. Unfortunately, Chapter 4 ended up being my least favorite of the franchise for 2 reasons. Bill Skarsgård Skarsgård's French accent was taking me out a bit. I don't think he was quite hitting the mark. Second, it's very long for no reason. They bring in a new character that is literally called Nobody, and he adds absolutely nothing. He's kind of just there, to be frank. If you took out all of his scenes and took him out of all of his other scenes, then I think that that would probably detract nothing from the plot, and it would have made for a way tighter runtime. I am almost 200,000% sure that he was just there to kind of set up potential spin-offs. I hate when they do that. I hate when that's the only reason why someone is in a movie. Part of my issue with Black Panther Wakanda Forever, too many characters. John Wick 2 comes in at number 3 for me in that franchise, just because it's probably my least favorite villain, the Italian man. And I think that the first and third movies are kind of tied for me, maybe a little bit more in favor of John Wick 3. The action in John Wick 3 Parabellum is unmatched. There's this one scene with knives. If you know, you know. If you're a horror fan and you love slashers and you haven't seen John Wick, get on that and do that expeditiously. Now up next we have women talking. Yes. Mennonite village women have been abused by the men in the village, and some have even been arrested. While the rest of the men are away for 2 days to bail them out of jail, the women must deliberate and make an impossible decision. This was nominated for Best Picture at the Oscars, the only Best Picture nom directed by a woman, and it also won Best Adapted Screenplay. I didn't like it. I thought that it was so bleak and dull. And sometimes that's the total vibe. The Witch, hello? In this movie, it felt more like they forgot that cinema is a visual medium, and I know that that sounds harsh, but visually it's so boring. The story is fascinating, heartbreaking, gripping, and then visually I just was so disinterested. It's also not a period piece, even though I bet that you thought that it was. It's very transportative nonetheless. It's just this really disturbing reminder that these cults really do still exist in the world, and that the patriarchy is disgustingly alive and well. So kudos to everything else about this movie, the acting especially, and the writing, that was all great. It's not very film bro of me to talk down so much on a Best Picture nom, I know. I guess we'll all just have to learn to deal with that. That'll do for all the non-horror though, yay! Now for all my horror rewatches, starting with Jennifer's Body. This was one of my very first watches of the month because, hello, it was Women's History Month, and that's history right there, if nothing else. I loved the movie this time around, but my score didn't go up very much. The first time I watched it, I gave it 2.5 stars because it had this sort of uncomfortable vibe to it that I couldn't quite pin down, and I thought that it was really flawed. I don't know if you guys have seen All Cheerleaders Die, but from what I can vaguely recall about that movie is that it has a kind of similar vibe to it. I didn't feel that as much this time around because I guess I just knew what to expect. And so many moments of the movie are iconic, so I did kind of have that expectation the second time around. I was far less concerned with like, oh, what's going on? Why is the plot so loose, etc. Speaking of a loose plot, The Blair Witch Project, another rewatch. I last rewatched this movie probably 8 months ago. Why do I watch this movie so often? I don't even know. I love it so much for no reason in particular. I just love the vibes of it. I often wish that I would be in the woods rather than wherever I am in any given situation, and this has a very strong forest vibe. So maybe that's why, but it also seems like no matter how many times I watch it, it always gets under my skin. What struck me most about it this time around upon reading reviews is how many people give it a low score because the characters are annoying. I think you should try developing empathy maybe. That's my advice. But that can't be taught. I don't think there's any way to explain to a person why they should care about other people. And if you were starving and lost in the woods with cold weather, you'd be pretty irritable too. I feel like if you made a Venn diagram of people who are annoyed by the Blair Witch Project and people who are annoyed by the Babadook, it would probably just be a circle. So I guess you either get it or you don't. I also recently decided that when I hit 20,000 subscribers, I'm going to get the Blair Witch symbol tattooed. So tell your friends, share the content. I also decided to watch the entire franchise, so I'll get to Book of Shadows soon, but next up I rewatched Blair Witch. This is a requel of sorts, I think, that came out in 2016. This follows a group of young adults who go into the Blair Witch Woods in search of one of their missing sisters. This is so bad. One of the best things about it is the body horror, and it's so foul. Do you like foot content? You like foot horror? Well, this movie's got it. I don't know why I used to think that this movie was good. Like, I actually used to recommend this movie on my channel. I think it's because I would tell people that if you're someone who prefers outright horror instead of implied horror, you might like this one more than the original. But it's just a bad movie. I don't think that I hold that opinion anymore because it might be true, but I don't feel like this movie is worth the time. Tell me why I would still watch it again though. It's like Blair Witch content just goes in in one ear and right out the other because no matter how many times I watch it, I'm just always down. My rating of this movie used to be 3.5 stars out of 5. That's dropped down to 2.5 stars out of 5. And the last time that I watched it was 2021. It was 2 years ago. Oh, the winds of change. The years start coming and they don't stop coming. Smash Mouth was just so right for that. The Descent is another absolute classic, a staple of women's history, one might say. This movie is about some women that go caving, and that's it. I'm not saying anything else. Go into this movie blind. That is the best piece of advice that I can offer you for this movie. Just strap in, enjoy the ride. I love this movie. There is atmospheric tension, there are jump scares, there's character drama, and if you can get your hands on the unrated cut, there is gore galore. I never thought that I was a huge gore person. In fact, it's one of the only things that a horror movie can do that still elicits like a physical response for me, but I'm really coming around to it because of movies like this. I love The Descent, always will. The Craft is up next. Of course, I was working through all the classic witch movies last month. I have a love-hate relationship with this movie because I love it, but I also hate it. I liked it way more this time around, actually loved it, but all the same issues that I have with it still remain. The third act all around is just so bad. I think it's way too apologetic of a lot of weird misogynistic bullshit. And where it fails is where I feel like The Craft legacy picked up the slack, but we'll get to that one. There's feminine empowerment in this movie until there isn't, because these characters have the worst arcs you've ever seen. I get that thematically it has to be that way because the movie's about how power corrupts, but boo, stinky. I hate the wasted potential. I'm ready for them to try again. Maybe instead of another requel, just remake it with like a Gen Z cast and set it in college. Hire me, give me money, let me make it better. I'm not gonna keep going on. My opinions and feelings about the movie haven't really changed that much. Same with this next one, The Witch, except that I fucking love this movie.
'Twas I what stole him. I be the witch of the wood.
Liar. Liar.
I am.
Chills. It's inspiring, really. It's one of the most depressing movies ever, and I love every moment of it. I guess it's because no matter how repressive and backwards this society becomes, I don't think it'll ever be that bad again. I'm not gonna be brainwashed with religious scripture and believe that I'm going to hell just for being a powerful woman. It's also such a potent commentary on the horrors of being the firstborn daughter. Thank God for being the youngest sibling. Shout out to my older sister for getting in trouble for things that my parents could not care less about with me. This movie is a very extreme take on that, and I would get into more of it, but I don't want to get into spoilers. It's just one of my favorite witch movies ever. Salute, Robert Eggers. Salute. 47 Meters Down is up next. I don't think I'd seen this one since I was a teenager, probably. This follows two sisters in Mexico who get into a rinky-dink shark cage, and of course, everything goes awry. This movie's pretty bad, which I was really bummed by because I liked it a lot the first time that I watched it all those years ago. It's so unbelievably corny, and the main characters are so stupid that you might start actively wishing death upon them. They get into the rustiest, crustiest shark cage that you've ever seen in your entire life. The level of hell no that these characters just blissfully walk towards is asinine. One girl's motivation is to look cool on Instagram because she had just been broken up with by her boyfriend for being boring. Women are just not that pathetic. I'm sorry, but especially at her big ass age, no woman is gonna be acting like that. I do love that Claire Holt is starring opposite her though, and she's from H2O and The Vampire Diaries, so she's like TV royalty to me. But she's no excuse to watch this. The sad thing is I watched it with my dad, and I was excited to show it to him because I had no recollection of the movie being that bad. We spent like maybe $4 to rent it, and he didn't like it at all, so that was definitely a flop. Only ever give that one a go if it's streaming for free somewhere and you're in the mood for a bad horror movie. The Craft Legacy is up next, and I'm sorry, but I still like this movie. It's so well-intentioned, and the characters are so lovely, it just has a terrible third act. I don't know why people hate this movie so much, and why they act like the original movie is not the exact same way. The original also has a terrible third act, and we still love her. I believe that if someday they just do a full-blown remake, they will figure it out. They'll just combine the strengths of each previous attempt, and then bam, we have a perfect film. Okay, yes, fine, I will write it and direct it, jeez. Now, Hush is the last horror rewatch of the month because it leaves Netflix on April 7th. I know that this is really short notice because I'm getting this video out a little bit late, but I was at a baby shower this weekend, so that was a lot of just, family time, family drama, such like that. But anyways, Hush has no physical media release. Like, you could probably find it online, but those are definitely pirated copies. And also, I am studying up on Mike Flanagan right now. And the last reason why I watched it is that it's just a really baller fucking horror movie. I'm so excited to talk more about that one in the next few weeks when that Mike Flanagan video comes out. So for now, I'll save most of my thoughts, but you'll know exactly how I feel because I'm gonna do a Mike Flanagan deep dive and then a ranking of everything he's ever directed. Now we're on to new watches of old horror movies, and I think that this is probably our biggest category of the month. Because one, like I said, was trying to explore a lot of witch movies, and two, there just weren't that many new releases in March. Book of Shadows, Blair Witch 2 is up first, one that I reluctantly finally went back to and finished. This sequel makes no damn sense at all. There's not a lick of sense being made here. I couldn't even think of where to begin with a synopsis. I gave it 1.5 stars on Letterboxd, and honestly though, I would probably watch it again and fall in love with it. I had started this movie, I think years ago at this point, like I don't even know when I first tried to watch it, and I could not finish it. I found the characters to be so insufferable, I couldn't spend another minute with them. But I was on this early 2000s horror bender earlier this year, like in January, and now I'm on more of a 90s bender, so I was just kind of in the mood. This one I think came out in 2000, and especially because, like I said, I was ranking my favorite witch movies last month too. It's so bad though, like one of the true 7 wonders of the world where you're like, how did everybody making this just agree that this was fine to release to the world? I guess I'll never get over it, or the fact that I think I kind of liked it. The Fourth Floor is up next, an interesting straight-to-DVD release. After her aunt dies, Jane moves into her old apartment. Things begin to get very strange when her downstairs neighbor proves to be very hostile. If you didn't notice, this also stars Juliette Lewis, of course from Cape Fear and more recently Yellowjackets. I don't know why she and other big names signed up for this one. It also briefly stars Shelley Duvall, because it's not good, but also it's absolutely not bad. I really enjoyed myself watching this one. 3 stars, it's a super easy watch. I was even kind of on the edge of my seat at times. I like the mystery of it, even if sometimes it was a little predictable. And Juliette Lewis is an insane raw talent. She's always fun to watch. I can understand why it went straight to DVD, but I think for a one-time watch, it's entertaining enough. Appendage is up next, a short film starring Rachel Sennett. This is the story of a young fashion designer who struggles to stand up to her boss and develops a debilitating growth. I watched this because it stars Rachel Sennett and it's only 6 minutes long, so I was like, whatever. It's not good at all, and it's also not funny like it's trying to be. And that's all I can say, because what else are you gonna say about a 6-minute long short? That being said, it's not gonna be a waste of your time, and it's starring our favorite girl, so. Swiftly moving on, The Witches of Eastwick was another first-time watch. 3 small-town friends are each feeling unfulfilled in life until one day a strange man shows up and changes everything. This movie is so fun. I think that it starts getting really good towards the second act and then just keeps escalating. The cast is to die for, right? We have Cher, we have Michelle Pfeiffer, and Susan Sarandon. It's just some of the most beautiful creatures that ever walked this earth. And Jack Nicholson, who is a piece of work, but talented nonetheless. The fact that they all agreed to make this is amazing to me. Because first of all, what other R-rated movies are this goofy these days? This movie is unabashedly weird and whimsical and so inappropriate all at once. I was laughing my ass off by the last act, partially in disbelief that something like this was even made, but I'm so grateful that it exists. The witchcraft itself is sort of minimal though, so if you're looking for more of an aesthetic witch movie, this doesn't really have that. You know, something along the lines of The Craft or The Love Witch, this movie doesn't really have that going on. There is a bit of a 90s glamour aesthetic to it though, and I really enjoyed that. I highly recommend it. It's just a really, really fun movie. The Witches is up next on the docket, a 1990 children's witch movie. While staying at a hotel with his grandmother, Luke inadvertently discovers a huge coven of witches who are intent on ridding the world of children. They are simply not making them like this anymore, and I'm not just saying that. PG-rated movies used to be fucking freaky. I can't believe how terrifying these witches looked. The practical effects are out of this world. I wish that they'd been saved for another movie because some of the other effects are pretty bad. bad. Like when the children are turned into mice, the switch from real mice to the puppets is really obvious, but it is frightening. If I had watched that as a child, I would have been completely traumatized. I don't love movies where the witches aren't the protagonists unless it's Hocus Pocus, so that's a problem I have with this one, but mostly because they're totally one note. They want to get rid of all children because they smell bad. I recognize that I shouldn't nitpick a children's movie from 1990, but this one just didn't really do it for me. I don't think I'll ever revisit it, but I am glad to have watched it at least once, especially for those effects. Bell Book and Candle is the next witchy flick on the docket. Jillian is a modern-day witch living in New York City when she encounters a man she wants to make hers, so she casts a love spell on him. This movie is fine, but it did not make my top 10 witch movie list. For a witch movie also, there's a lot of male drama, and I'm sorry, but I don't give a Oh, a beautiful woman cast a love spell on you. Cry me a river, pal. One of my favorite things about this movie, though, is the cat. I love a witch movie that has an animal. I think it's very important. Familiars are extremely crucial to a lot of witches, and I think that this is a movie that recognizes that. More witch movies should do this, even though Robert Eggers would tell you to never work with a goat because it was a nightmare. I mean, any good director would probably advise that you never work with children or animals. Cats are the best, though. That's always what I'm gonna want to see. But there's not much else to say about this one because majority of the movie kind of just feels like it's men talking to each other. And I have no interest in that when I'm supposed to be watching a witch movie. Luckily, Eve's Bayou is up next, and it is not guilty of that. This drama follows the family of Eve Baptiste's emotional turmoil amid several painful revelations over the course of a hot Louisiana summer in the 60s. Judging by that acting lineup, there is some powerhouse acting going on in this movie. It's written and directed by Cassie Lemons, who directed Harriet in 2019 and more recently the Whitney Houston biopic. She deserves a little bit more attention, especially considering that the performances that she directs are Oscar worthy, especially in Eve's Bayou. You're not gonna find child acting that's much better than this anywhere else. Obviously, Journey Smollett has gone on to do a ton of amazing work, I think most recently in Lovecraft Country, and I don't need to tell you about Samuel L. Jackson. This movie just has a great cast, but it's not a horror movie, and it's kind of barely a witch movie. There's maybe 5 minutes of this movie devoted to voodoo witchcraft, and so it also didn't make my top 10 just because I didn't really feel like it counted. It's a drama through and through, and it's a damn good one. I Married a Witch is the very last witch movie we have to talk about today, though. In the 1600s, Jennifer and her father are burned at the stake for witchcraft, but not before they cast a curse on their murderers. After being freed 250 years later, Jennifer decides to torture the descendant of her abuser by making him fall in love with her. This movie is so good, I absolutely fell in love with it. It's one of the oldest movies that I've ever seen, coming out in 1942, but the humor in it is completely ageless. It's goofy, it's inoffensive, it's just a really lighthearted good time, despite a lot of the subject matter kind of being pretty dark. The stakes never really feel that high because you're just having a good time. Also, the movie magic back in the day was incredible. All these little bits of her magic and performing it are so funny. A lot of it is done for the comedic value, and I was able to buy into it a lot more than I was the weird CGI moments in The Craft Legacy, if you can believe that. I just absolutely adore the witch in this movie. She's so cute with this outrageously nonchalant personality. I was cracking up. I think this movie is wonderful. This movie, The Witches of Eastwick, and The Witch are all on HBO Max right now. What a time to be alive. That's it for witch movies though, but Idle Hands is up next, so keeping on with that 90s theme. Anton Tobias has his hand possessed by a demonic force, and life gets much more interesting. However, not for the better, as his hand decides to go after those closest to him. This movie is also hilarious. I'm obsessed with it. It's not the best comedy I've ever seen, but the cast is out of this world. Devon Sawa is perfect as the lead of this movie. He is so fucking talented. He can do intense drama. He can do straightforward horror. And I think that most importantly, this man gets comedy. Talk about physical comedy. Talk about comedic timing. I think this man should be getting much larger roles than he does. I know he's huge in our world, but I'm just kind of surprised that at the moment he hasn't really transcended horror. I'm saying this so honestly. I think that this is one of his best roles. Kylie, a role where he's just this stoner and his hand takes on a life of its own. Yes! Do you know how hard it is to do something like that and not look stupid? So few actors actually understand physical comedy. One of the best ones that comes to mind is Michael J. Fox in Back to the Future. Devon Sawa is a physical comedian. I want to see more of that in Chucky season 3. He deserves a zanier character, I think. Let him have some more fun. Also, what a perfect 420 horror movie, by the way. You're welcome for recommending it to you. But that will do it for all my new watches of of old horror movies, so what you've finally been waiting for, let's talk about new releases. Starting with The Harbinger, which is now free to stream on Tubi. Plagued by horrific nightmares of The Harbinger, a woman enters a hellish dreamscape to confront her worst fears. This movie was so much better than what I was expecting for a sort of straight to Tubi kind of release. I think it has a long way to go before I would consider it to be a great film, but I do feel like a lot of the pieces are there. The acting is probably the biggest standout of this movie. I think that everyone carried themselves so well. The concept and the writing were also done super well, and for a movie that was set in the early days of the pandemic, I think that was done exquisitely. It didn't feel shoehorned in, it just felt very true to my lived experience of that time. It was never really a plot device, but it was just the perfect backdrop for all of the thematic stuff going on in the movie. It deals with death and being forgotten, which I think is horrific to a lot of people. So it was really smart to set it during that first year of the pandemic, because I think that was on a lot of people's consciousness at that time. To some, mortality is not as bad as being forgotten, because I think to an extent everyone kind of wants to contribute something and be remembered by humanity. So I think conceptually this movie preys on a very basic instinctual fear. Again, it's not great, but I think that it is worth the watch, especially because now I'm really excited for whatever these people make next. I think it just shows so much promise, and it's free on Tubi, so give it a go. Scream 6 is up next, which I have seen twice in theaters, and I'm going for a third time this weekend. Who's gonna stop me? You can find all my Scream content on my page. I've laid it out all very nicely for you to find. If you somehow missed out on my Scream for Dummies series, that's crazy, you're missing out, so go back and catch up. 65 is up next, a quiet release that has now fizzled out of public attention. After a terrible crash on an unknown planet, pilot Mills must get himself and a young girl with whom he can't communicate with to the escape pod that landed several kilometers away from the ship. This movie is not as bad as everyone says it is, it's just basic. You've seen this movie or some variation of it probably 100 times before, and in my opinion, that doesn't make it bad. You may conflate unoriginal and basic with bad, and that's totally your prerogative. I think it's a 3-star film. It's not anything meaningful or anything that's memorable at all, but I think you'll be entertained. Some people said that they were really bored though, so maybe don't take my word for it as someone that loves pretty much anything having to do with dinosaurs. I think that for what it is, it did its job. People have really different expectations for movies now, because for the longest time, movies in theaters were either Marvel or Oscar bait. There wasn't much wiggle room for the stuff in between, but now nature is healing. It's the return of mediocre cinema. I would say the same thing about Cocaine Bear. It's not good, but it's entertaining enough to enjoy a night out at the movies. Unlike Cocaine Bear, I probably would not say, yeah, this one is worth taking the family out this weekend to go see it, but it's out of theaters by now anyway in most places, and so do I recommend spending the money to rent this one at home? Possibly. We'll just see how much they're charging for it. Speaking of video on demand, Unseen is the final new release we have to talk about on this fine day. Unseen follows Emily, who has been kidnapped by her ex-boyfriend, into the woods. When she escapes, she must call a stranger named Sam to help her navigate the forest, because without her glasses, she's legally blind. This is yet again another 3-star movie that I feel like is worth seeing for the entertainment value. It's a concept we haven't seen before. I've also never seen a horror movie directed by an Asian woman. It was only $6 on Amazon. I think you can also rent it on like Google Play and Apple TV. And the movie is only an hour and 20 minutes long. Bliss. Granted, there was no way you could have stretched that movie to be any longer than it was, but what they were able to do to juice up the story was baffling. Like, this movie gets so insane, you'll be sitting there just kind of in complete disbelief. I think in a good way though, because it's really comedic. A lot of the comedy doesn't land because there is a real tonal tug of war going on that is really weird in this movie. But Missy Pyle is really something here. I don't think that she gets paid the credit she's due for the amount of character acting she's consistently doing. Midori Francis also does not get the credit she's due. I loved her in this movie. She had the best performance out of everyone by a mile. Would love to get her in a rom-com or a witch movie. This is another one like The Harbinger where, yeah, it's pretty average, but it does show a lot of style and promise. So again, I'm excited to see what this director does next, and I hope that Blumhouse keeps a relationship with her. I could see her doing some wild stuff with a bigger and better budget, and so someday I just want to see her get free reign. Do I recommend that you spend $6 on this movie? I do, actually. There's not that much coming out right now, especially not in the horror thriller department. Thank God for Yellowjackets, but it's actually just kind of been a painfully dry year for horror, so thank God for Scream 6 as well, even though that one also has a lot of problems. If you support this movie though, it will definitely incentivize Blumhouse to keep hiring women of color, and we love to see that. Unfortunately, that does it for all the new releases that I watched in March. Kind of a dry month. I'm just kind of bummed that I have yet to watch a new release that I really loved this year, but hopefully that's coming. I'm so excited for Beau is Afraid. Parade. Oh, and Renfield. Those are two of my most anticipated movies of the year right now. But hopefully you got some good witch movie recommendations today, if nothing else. Oh, one of my least anticipated movies of this year, The Pope's Exorcist, is also coming out soon. That one will probably get a drunken or stoned solo review / rant over on Patreon, which yes, by now surely you have noticed these lovely names scrolling on the screen. These are my patrons, and we love them on this channel because without them, I would not be able to produce all this free content for the rest of you. If you'd like to get 4 to 6 bonus videos every single month, then you can find the link to that down below. My next bonus video is going to be a review on Bad Milo, a very strange dark comedy about an ass demon. You want to hear more about that? Yeah, I know you do, so join us down below. It's a riot. If that's not for you though, totally get it. All the rest of my social media is listed down below as well. I get real weird on Instagram and Twitter, so go nuts, have fun over there. And let me know your favorite new release of the last month down below, or your least favorite release, or what you're most excited for this month. Anything and everything, I want to hear it. But more than anything, I just hope that you enjoyed this video and that you're as excited as I am for the Oscars next week. Bye!